Hey friends, it's Lee here from CORE. And at this time of the year, I'm always thinking about leadership because it's when we are preparing to start our leadership development training. And something we've been doing for, more than 10 years, 15 years now. And there's so many rich topics around leadership, and a couple things have been sitting with me, and a dynamic I want to share with you that I hope you'll find helpful is on my mind and heart today. And hopefully this will ring true for you, and it might give you some insight into how to claim leadership more fully in your life. Like, what's the impediment to leadership right now for you, and how might you claim it more fully in your life? So let's get going. So what's the problem right now? Well, we live in a very complex time. I mean, I think anyone would say that right now with what's happening in the world, socially, politically, COVID related, it's a complex time. And one of the things that seems to create for us, and for people in general, maybe for you, is a sense of waiting and reactivity. It's a real time right now, I sense, of waiting and reactivity. And there's a lot of triggering energy that happens when we find ourselves in reactive mode or waiting mode. And so that's kind of the sense of the world right now, is one of waiting for something to happen. And in fact, maybe waiting for leaders to stand up, to step up. Not to mention COVID puts us all in survivor mode. Instead of thriving, we just try to survive, right? So that's kind of the territory we're in right now. So what is this dynamic that happens? I call it the firecracker mode, right? So think about firecrackers, right? You put two firecrackers next to each other, one of them pops, well, the other one goes off too, right? And that's what happens to us in reactivity. And that's happening all over the place right now, everywhere. And see if you can see this in your own life, in the culture that you live, maybe in your own circle. This dynamic of the firecracker, what happens when we get into firecracker mode, into that reactive mode? Well, here are a few of the hallmarks. We struggle to stand in our own truth. This is something that happens in this place. Our own deepest truth, our own values seem to evaporate. We don't claim them. We can't claim them. And when someone challenges us, we just tear them down, right? That's part of firecracker mode, that reactive mode. When I don't claim my own center, the best I can do is tear somebody else down, right? Related to that, second dynamic that comes up in this space is simply being derailed, right? I was going to say I love social media, but those people who know me well know I don't. I use social media, and I'm happy to use it, and I'm grateful for it. But think about the dynamic that happens, this derailing dynamic that happens when we're cruising along in Facebook or someplace and we see a challenging post or a post we don't agree with. All of a sudden, it causes us to derail, to kind of go off course, and we end up angry and frustrated. And we say something we'd probably regret, and it doesn't come from our healthy self, and we feel worse than when we started, right? And we sense somehow we've been derailed. That's the second way that this firecracker dynamic shows up. Third way, simply in intimate relationships, we find ourselves reacting, saying things we wish we hadn't said, saying things we regret, and saying things maybe we mean them in the moment, but in our best self, in our truest self, in our most compassionate self, we don't mean them. And unfortunately, we can't undo them. They can never be undone when we come from that place. Another dynamic that happens in firecracker mode that you may recognize is what I call the concentric circle, right? So we get triggered, we get reactive, and we spin into this more and more self-focused concentric circle that just gets tighter and tighter. And our relationship to others and our capacity for others, and even our capacity to tend to ourselves, shrinks. And we feel small, right? So that's that concentric feeling where everything gets narrower, not more focused in a good way, but narrower, right? And it seems that we in the world get smaller. Now, those are some of the dynamics that I see happening right now in the world. You might say there was a time, not too long ago, when most of us maybe lived a kind of neutral space. We lived a neutral life. We didn't claim leadership, but we maybe weren't so reactive. Right now we're in a time of high reactivity, not neutrality, but it seems we're still waiting for leaders to show up, right? Think of the good old days, whenever those were. And I think there was a time in our culture when we trusted leaders to show up and lead us through, and we didn't have to do it. What I want to tell you today is those times, as best I can tell, for better or for worse, have passed. And now is not the time to wait for leaders. It simply doesn't work because it'll put us into survival mode, right? While we're waiting, we're reacting. Now is the time to claim your own leadership. That's my proposal. Now we, all of us, in some sense, need to step into leadership. That moves us out of this reactive space. So, if we don't do that, if we don't choose that kind of leadership for ourselves, what happens? Well, first of all, we get more of the same. More of this kind of malaise, more of this waiting. And waiting in this sense is not the same thing as surrendered, right? This is a different kind of waiting. It's disempowered. And that just kind of feeds itself. So we'll get more of that. The second thing that may happen, well, it's already happening, is our mental emotional health goes down the toilet, right? So right now, suicide rates are quite high and rising. On college campuses, the number one mental health issue over the past 10 years, and it's quite high again now, is anxiety, right? So our mental health is deteriorating. Our emotional resilience is depleted. This is what happens if we sit in this, right? More and more emotional resilience, our healthy ability to respond just disappears in favor of overwhelm. But it doesn't have to be this way. And so my invitation for you today in this little reflection is to consider how can you step into leadership in your life. To not wait for leaders to show up, but how are you personally invited to claim leadership? And let me give you just a few ways that you can do that, right? These are things that help cultivate that. 1, put yourself in a space of choice rather than reactivity. Do things, create spaces, put yourself in situations where you are at choice for your life, right? Not reactive, not always responding this way, but where you have the pace and the mental emotional capacity to make a choice. Sometimes it's called agency for your life. We always have it, but we don't always claim it. So, number 1, claim your agency. Number 2, knowing who you are and what you deeply value. What do you value? Right? That's a really important question. What are you a stand for? What do you claim for your life? When you know that, it'll help move you into leadership. Self-awareness, being grounded in self-awareness, critical for leadership so that we can reflect on those triggers that I just talked about. What are the things that get me? What are the things that trigger me? Where are my weak spots? Where are my wounds? Just as where are my values, right? So to be aware of myself, right? Not a bad thing. That's not the same thing as self-involved. Cultivating self-awareness is essential for leadership. A couple more quick ones. Go deeper than the pop culture. You got to go deeper than the pop culture. Being at the surface of pop culture is absolutely a way to get tossed and turned in that reactive waiting state. So what are the things that ground you in something deeper than everyday pedestrian pop culture? In what's happening in the news, what's happening in the world at the surface level. You got to go deeper than that if you want to lead yourself and you want to lead others. And then the last one is connection and community, right? Really getting yourself connected to others. Leadership also happens in a network. It happens with friends. It happens through connection. It happens through support and accountability. It doesn't happen by yourself. We can't pull ourselves up into leadership by our bootstraps. So these are some of the tools that I hope you find helpful that we've cultivated over the many years of leading leaders here at CORE. And there's some of the values and the practical tools we teach at the Leadership Development Training. So I encourage you to cultivate these in your life, and if they speak to you, if you know that these are things that you are ready to take on, I invite you to check out the Leadership Development Training, where we set aside the better part of a year to cultivate, to focus on, and to teach you how to live these tools. So if that speaks to you, please check out the Leadership Development Training, the LDT. We would love to have you join us. That's it for now. Go forward in leadership. See you soon.